So our next speaker is Andrew Olah of Olah Inc. And he's poor guy. He's been on a marathon already, like 48 hours of Kingpins 24. But now he's going to join us and talk about cotton for about 20 minutes. If you've got any questions, guys, like remember to go into the Q&A section at the bottom. I'll try and read out as many as I can. I'm not going to interrupt Andrew, but Andrew, sort of like, take it away. Welcome.
So good morning and hi everybody. Before I start, I wanted to comment on a couple of things. We talked a little bit about, or everybody's been talking about, Denise, especially about cost of sustainability. But the question is actually up to you guys. You're the students, you're the customers. It's up to you. Do you not want to pay more for something which doesn't harm the earth versus paying less for something that does? So I guess that's your question, and you'll decide the future of our industry, because I think you all would prefer to know through transparency what is going on with each garment. And then once you knew what was going on, then you can make your decision of whether you want to pay it more or not. I think it's difficult to make your decision if you don't know what's going on. So that's one thing I want to say. The second thing is Michael's presentation about Lenzing and use of waste. I was in their factory, and one of the things that actually blew my mind, and which I love, is that 60% of their energy comes from organic waste, which means basically garbage. So one of the things that I think is amazing about our industry in general is how we can start using garbage as a resource. So that's the thing I wanted to mention. And the third thing also involves you guys out there, is that Miguel gave a huge number of how much water is used in jeans. But what I don't think he mentioned completely was that 50% of that usage is the consumer. So in other words, we can produce a cotton jean, but then you go home and you wash it on a regular basis, assuming you do. And if you do, then that amount of water that you use is also impacted. I don't know if that was included in Miguel's number, but I have a feeling it was. For more information on that, you can do a Google search on Levi Strauss LCA. And on that, you'll see the study that they made about the use of water by consumers, which is huge. So let's go to cotton. Cotton is a complex subject. It's unlike the other fibers that you've heard about today. It's not a product that's really produced in a factory. It's produced in the field, and it grows. And you can see this gentleman here. He loves what he grows, or at least he did when he took this picture. Numbers are a funny thing. It's an old fiber. This document says it's 7,000 years old, but it could be 6,733, or it could be 7,262 years. We don't know exactly, and I don't think it matters. It's old. The second thing is it's soft. It has reasonable strength. It's absorbent. It's quite comfortable in hot weather. And somewhere along the line, sometimes it has a bad reputation, which I'm here always to actually be cotton's person that would argue on their behalf that doesn't deserve a bad reputation. I think it's a lovely fiber, and it grows in arid conditions. Arid conditions means that it's not a wet area. I have a friend in Vietnam, and he always wants to grow cotton, but he can't because there's too much rain and it comes too quickly. It's tropical. The other thing that I want to mention as we get into this is that I have a lot of data. And as students, I think it's really important that you guys become data freaks and ask yourself always, is there data? When someone makes a claim, is there a data? And also then where's that data from? My data comes from the International Cotton Advisory Committee, which you'll see at the bottom of the sheet here. And that's an organization in Washington, DC, composed of 44 countries that grow cotton. And it's been around since 1939. And the data they get is from their agriculture departments. So if you rhetorically look at my way I ask questions, is that data real? Well, it comes from each country and is verified. So I think the data is quite usable. Cotton quality. Well, we look at cotton and base cotton quality on a bunch of features. One is the length of the fiber. So if you pull from that cotton boll, you'll see how long the fiber is, the maturity, the strength, the microneer, the trash content, the reflectiveness, and the color. Color is important in some cases. If you have any questions on detail, because I don't have a lot of time to go into this, and each one of these is a subject in itself, you can email me and I'll answer your questions. But here's the part that I love about cotton. Cotton is grown in 80 countries. I think the world has 180. 250 million people are involved in cotton production, providing for 110 million households. It's not made in a factory. It's made by this guy in this picture and the guy on the bike. 500 million people around the world, not only those guys, by the way, there are other people, but there are people, I'll get into detail to show you later. 500 million people around the world depend on cotton, or at least a portion of it, for their income. So if you think of the world has 7 billion people, this is a very, very significant number of the role that cotton plays in the world. Unlike man-made fibers, and this is a big difference between cotton and the other fibers that were talked about this morning, they make them in a factory, so a little bit comes out every day, or a lot comes out every day, and they have an ability to change the quantity that comes out every day. Cotton comes out when it's finished, like a cake. So imagine all the cotton in the United States all comes out basically in a very short period of time. So that means decisions on what to do with it have to be made quickly because the farmers want to be paid, and obviously it's a big problem to store it. So if all the polyester in the world came out in one day and had to be stored, I don't even know how we would deal with that. So cotton is really different than the other products, and therefore there are traders involved in the movement of cotton because the farmers, like this guy in the picture, wants to be paid when he's ready. Cotton is flat. This is a picture under a microscope of what cotton looks like, and you can see why it's absorbent because the little water goes inside the little flat parts. These are areas where cotton is grown in the world. And generally, these are not really rainy areas. And I'll give you statistics in a second because I think statistics in cotton tell you the major story of what you need to know. So we're going to give you 4 slides here. I want to get rid of my picture because I keep looking at myself where the numbers are. So let's take a look at the top 15 cotton producers in 2019 and 20. And again, the numbers don't matter to you. I don't think they're that important. What matters is the combination of the numbers and the relationship between other numbers. So clearly here you can see that China, India, USA, Brazil, Pakistan are the majority producers, the major producers of cotton. And I didn't do the calculation, but probably the top 4 countries are bigger than all the rest put together. So if they, that's a really significant piece of information because that is really a lot to understand about the industry. These are the 4 biggest producers, and this is a list of the top 15. There are, of course, many other countries, but I didn't list them because their quantities are not as significant. Next, 1 second. Next, so for all the Americans out there, I apologize because we're dealing with hectares. This gives you the size of, ooh, that's interesting. So this gives you the, in metric tons, cotton production in the area that's used to grow it. So I think this is super fascinating. So China has an area of 3 million hectares, India 12 million, United States 5 million, Brazil 1.6, Pakistan 2.9. If you look at Australia, it's so tiny. But then if you look at the right side, which gives you the yield. Yield's an interesting word in English, and I'm not sure everyone understands yield. But yield means what you get out of it. So what is the output of a certain size of field? If you look at that, you'll see that China has a huge output. I'll come back to that in a second. India is quite small. USA is in the middle. Brazil is wildly wonderful. Turkey seems amazing, and Australia are amazing. Those are the leaders. The Chinese quality is an issue, so that I think that number is it's an ICAC number, as you can see in the bottom right-hand corner. It's not my number, and I questioned them on it because I thought that was so bizarre. But they said that their quality is completely different than other people's quality. So it's not also always how much you produce, but it's also what is the point of it and how good is it. So, for instance, Australia's quality is fantastic, and the United States can be good sometimes or usually. And Brazil is excellent. So these numbers are also really, really interesting. Then this is a super important number for you to understand our industry by. China, as you can see, has the tiniest little farms. They're 0.3 hectares, 8 hectares. Clearly, those are subsistence farming farms where a family farms it. India's 3 times bigger, so 300% bigger, but also really, really tiny. There's somebody here watching our show today who's from Australia, and their farm is, I don't even know, 50,000 or 70,000 acres or 40,000 hectares, something like that. So there are farms in Australia like that. There are farms in the United States that are 5,000, 10,000, 20,000. So these farms in that relationship are really, really super tiny. And you look in, the average in the United States is 312. The average in Brazil is 756. And I think that in Brazil there's a farm, if I'm not wrong, that's like 100,000 acres in size, or 50,000 hectares. So there are some massive farms, but it's very difficult when you deal with little tiny farms. It's very difficult for that farmer to fill one particular order. So for example, if you wanted to know where your jeans are from, you wanted to have your cotton from a specific farm, a little farm like this can't actually participate in that because the production of the yarn requires a lot of input. So that has to be a collection of farms. Whereas if you deal with a big farm and a modern farm, then those farms are able to give you the full production. For instance, theoretically, if a brand wanted to, they could go to 1 or 2 farms or 3 farms and make their whole production with those farms if they wanted. They select not to, but that's another story which we won't get into right now. And then we have to talk about organic. There's no way that we can't talk about organic, but actually before we talk about organic, let's go backwards for a second. I want to show you this number in the 3rd column, which at the bottom row in the gray, you see the number of farmers. And beside it, you see the farmers from 2017 also, cotton area. But look at the number of farmers. There are 26 million farmers. So ICAC says it's 26 million. Say it's 25, say it's 28, doesn't really matter. That's a lot of farmers. Now we go here. So we go here and let's start looking at 2011. You will see that at that time, 0.5% of all cotton was organic. You all hear all the day, all along, always you'll hear how popular organic cotton is and how great it is. But the next year it went down to 42.42%, then 4.4, then back to 5.2, then back to 4.7, and then back to 4.4, which takes us up to 2007, which is the available data that I had. So what does that number mean? That number means that 99.6% of the 26 million farmers that grow cotton every year make a decision every year not to grow organic. So one of the questions that I always have as a student of this industry is, well, why would that be? And if I was with you in public right now, I would ask you to raise your hands if any of you could answer that question. Why would so many farmers out of 26 million, which means almost, I guess the number, I don't even know what that works out to, but 25 million something decide every year not to grow organic? If it's such a great product, why don't they grow it? Because a farmer would always want to grow what would be the best possible product they could get for their field. Well, the only answer is because the price. And the price is what? The price is probably, to grow organic cotton, is a price that exceeds what the retailers think you as students or as consumers want to pay, so they select not to do it. So I think that's a really important question for you guys to ask. Let's keep going. Now, cotton industry is a crazy industry, and that's why I said it's complicated. Everybody has a cotton brand. I'm not really sure why, but they all have a brand and they all tell you stories about what those brands do. If you look at this collection of brands, you have Cotton Australia on the right, you have Fair Trade Cotton. In the middle, you have Proudly Made in Africa. You have the Cotton Leads program in America, which now they have a new one, which they've replaced it with, called, I think, Trust Protocol. You have the organic brand, you have Supima, you have an E3 in America, and you have BCI, of course, which is one of the most popular today. Then we have to talk about GMO. For those of you that don't know what that stands for, it's genetically modified cotton. And that was created in 1996. And the idea of GMO was to create a seed that had the ability to kill insects, because one of the biggest problems cotton has in growing is that insects can attack it. So the idea was that companies could actually alter the seed and in that way get a higher yield and get the farmers a chance to make more money. What this means and what it's come to today, it's how many years since then? It's like almost 20, 30 years later. We now have 80% of the world is using GMO seeds. 100% of the seeds in Australia and Argentina are GMO. 96 in China, 96 in Pakistan, 96 in the United States, and 93 in India. So let's go back to my little sheets here where we grow. China's 90 something, India's 90 something, USA's 90 something, Brazil's 90, 80 something, Pakistan's 90 something. It's really incredible the size of market that GMO has. It is not allowed, and I've written on top here, it's banned to farm in the United States or the United EU, Europe. And I've asked many times why that is. And from what I understand, there is no empirical reason not to grow it in Europe, but there's no reason not to. In other words, nobody feels that there's been enough research on the damage that it can cause. So there's no reason statistically or from a research point of view, but there's no reason to do it or not to do it. So it's not done. But, which I think is funny, whenever I go to Europe, I go to Amsterdam for our show, I always buy this amazing popcorn they have there. And I know all of the seeds are from, and all the popcorn itself, the corn is from the United States, which is GMO. So Europe has no problem to import it so that you guys in Europe can have it. They just don't allow you to grow it. Basically, the idea of GMO is that it improves the quality and yield, as I mentioned. Then there's extra long staple cotton, which is defined as a particular length of the fiber, which is 1 3/8 and longer. It's grown in the United States, Egypt, Peru, China, and India, and there are some brands involved with ELS. Then BCI, and its equivalents will represent 30% of cotton production. They reach out to 5 million farmers. What they do, and what is the beauty of BCI and the idea of BCI when it first started, was that BCI and its stakeholders, which were some of the brands and different foundations, was to educate farmers in developing nations on how to use their inputs more sustainably, use less water, use less pesticides, educate them. And I think they've done a great job with that, and they grew their market share, and a lot of brands collaborate with them because they like what they're doing. You can see below the number of brands that participate with the BCI program. One of the problems with BCI is that they sell on a mass balance system. So companies that use BCI cotton do not have to actually put that cotton in the garment that you buy. They just commit to the program. So whatever you buy might or might not be grown in a sustainable way. You have no idea. Their reach is in 21 countries, 2 million farmers. And then we come to organic. Organic cannot use genetically modified seeds. They're supposed to only use organic fertilizer and pesticides. It's difficult to prove if they don't or they do. Cannot use synthetic herbicides. Use beneficial insects. I love that when they use other insects to eat out the insects they want to get rid of. And a farm cannot turn organic just because they wake up one morning and decide they want to go organic. They have to go through a transitional period of 2 to 3 years of growing organic before they're actually allowed to be called organic. And they rely on crop rotation like many farms do that are not organic. So if you go to our website, kingpinshow.com, I'll repeat that, kingpinshow.com. We have an article that I wrote about cotton and transparency in cotton, because one of my personal beliefs is that we as a society need to know where everything comes from, and we need to know which farm produced whatever we're wearing. And I wrote an article with that. You guys might want to take a look at that. My question to you as students and as consumers is, please, please ask for data. If somebody tells you a story, please don't believe it. Ask them to prove it. There's some great books on cotton. If you want more books, I can suggest others to you. But if you're really interested in cotton, I highly recommend that you read some of these books. And there's my email. If you have any questions, if there's anything I can do to help you in your understanding of cotton, it's a very important fiber. And I can't imagine a condition that where jeans will be without cotton. It's a majority fiber.
Thank you.
So that's it.
Oh, thank you. I didn't mean to interrupt you. It's always fascinating hearing so much about cotton, especially all of the facts and figures explained so well and so easy as well. It's very confusing, and there's so much, not greenwashing, but there's so much marketing behind cotton. It's shocking to know that only 0.51% of all cotton producers are organic. So all these brands, Andrew, it's a question for you, that say they're organic. It can't be all organic, surely. If it's
no, I think that when I first got really involved in this subject, someone once told me there was like 500 times more garments sold that say they're organic than are grown. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but you have to say that 2 or 3 times to actually comprehend that.
Yeah, it's shocking. And I've got one question. There's one question. Oh, there's a couple of questions that have come in as well. Oh, they've all jumped in now. My question first. the UK government is now trying to limit the cotton coming from parts of China where it's the forced labor camps. What's your feelings? The guys, there's a lot of, obviously it's been quite big in the news.
This is a typical thing for students to understand. So the newspaper says something. Okay, who's the newspaper? The newspaper is a writer. What does the writer? Have they been there? Have they spoken to the military? Have they seen anything? No, never. They got the information from somebody else. But who is that somebody else? Did they tell you who that somebody else is? Can you call that person?
Isn't it?
Do you know who that person is? Does that person have any proof?
Murdoch.
So anybody can say anything today in our social media or in our press, and what they say is contested rarely. And I think that I believe in information. I'm sure some of those stories are true, but I'm not sure that you can paint a brush on every single farmer in China in the Northwest that has that issue.
Okay, let's read some of the questions. We've got a question here. Hello from Istanbul. Oh, it's about Michael's question. I'm so sorry. I'll get Michael to answer the question. Andrew, thank you for your clear presentation. What is a disadvantage of BCI that he mentions? I think someone missed something that you said. The disadvantage of BCI.
I wouldn't say it's a disadvantage. It's a problem in the sense that it's not transparent. Yeah. So I'm a big believer that if you want sustainable products, and I think we should all want that as consumers, then we should know something about them. So that means that if you have a gene in an ideal world, that gene would be able to tell you how much water was used in that gene, who grew it, where it's died, all that information. Now, if you can't get that information, then whatever story there is not really validated.
Ideally, most brands are heading towards sort of blockchaining, especially bigger brands that can afford the systems in place. So these sort of...
Can you name a single garment that you can buy today that tells you what's in it?
No.
Okay. But we're going to go there.
But that's kind of the dream, right? That's the dream, ideally, that you buy a garment, it'll have a barcode on it.
It's not a dream. It's available today, and our industry refuses to deliver on the information they have. Yeah. It's not a dream. It's an intentional attempt to avoid the data.
Yeah, that's true. One last question. How has organic cotton production increased if there's already more than 90% production that are GMO?
It's not. Well, it's increasing so slightly.
Yeah.
And if people out there want organic, and for whatever reason they do, I also think organic doesn't really present a lot of data. I don't think anybody has this huge trove of data proving that organic is better than any other cotton. But anyway, if somebody does want it, all they have to do is tell their brands that they love it and they want to pay more, and they can have as much as they want. Every farmer would want to grow anything that they can make a profit on.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's it, I think. But thank you so much for your presentation. I'm sure the students, I definitely valued it, especially all those facts and figures that were made so easy to understand. So thank you so much for your time, and
thank you.
You can go back to sleep now as well, Andrew. I'm sure you've been up for 40 hours or more.
Oh, I'm not going to sleep, Mohsin. It's too much fun watching you.
Oh, bless you. No, I'm trying my best.